Hello everyone, welcome back, and today we're going to look at the Bari Sax, ranges of the Bari Sax, or the range I should say, and the characteristics of the sounds. Bari Sax is an interesting instrument because in my mind it really has a couple of different functions in an ensemble, big band, or even a smaller group, especially big band though. So let's go through the range real quick. This instrument is written up an octave and a major sixth. So what you hear in bass clef down here, I would look down here in the bass clef notes and have a better idea. I still have a hard time, looking at a note in the middle of the staff or treble clef and hearing a low note. So look down here and we'll go through the range and I'll explain some of the things. I'll give you an example of a couple of different ways I use the Bari Sax, and I think a lot of other writers do as well. So the Bari Sax, as I mentioned, is a transposing instrument. It's really like alto sax down an octave. Except alto sax is up a major sixth transposition. This is an octave and a major sixth. So the lowest note on a Bari Sax is a low C, which would be 2 octaves below middle C. And not every Bari Sax, probably most today, have what's called an A key. But to play this note, this low C, they need a low A key. And you're probably okay writing it. You may want to avoid it just because you never know who's going to be, playing the note, or what instrument as far as the capability of that instrument. But don't go below a low C. I remember years ago I was working with Frank Mantooth, and we were working on a chart, and I wrote a low B for the Bari Sax, and he didn't notice it until a recording session. So the Bari Sax raises his hands and says, I can't play this note. So that was an interesting experience. So I learned from that mistake and never wrote below a low C for Bari Sax. So everything's a learning experience, I guess. But anyway, you can avoid that if you want. You're probably safe if you do that. So let's move on to the next section here. From low D flat up an octave, maybe around C or D flat, the Bari Sax is nice as a bass, like a bass trombone would be. And I intermix bass trombone and Bari Sax a lot. A lot of times I'll voice out the 5 saxes with the Bari in this area for a bass note. So we've got the root, third, 7th, and probably the 9th, and maybe an upper extension or something like that. A 5-note voicing, and I'll put the bass note and the Bari Sax down in this range, in this octave. So consider doing that. It works well. In that case, the bass trombone probably would be playing within the section of the trombone section. So I generally don't double the bass note for Bari Sax and bass trombone, although I know people that do that all the time. I tend to do one or the other. So this is a very strong range for Bari Sax, and the bass notes sound fine. So moving on into the next octave basically is a very blendable range for the Bari Sax. And this is the kind of thing you'll see voicings, 5-note voicings, or maybe soli, sax soli, that type of thing. And it blends well right in that octave. So you can think of this as kind of the bass octave, and this is the octave where you can blend and do voicings that don't necessarily put they wouldn't put the Bari Sax on the root of the chord. Down here, you don't want to have this range as not a root of the chord. So anything in this range is going to be a root of the chord. Remember that once the lowest note in a voicing gets below like D flat or C, right in this area, then it's going to start functioning as a root. And you're going to have multiple roots going on if you have the bass player playing a different note than the Bari Sax down there, especially if they're playing in like unison. So moving on to the next one, we don't have much left here. We've only got about a fifth left, but this is a more thin range. Maybe you could do like a solo part here. It's thin, but it can be expressive in this area. And then finally up a high F sharp. It's kind of like alto sax, except down an octave. You'd have to have an F sharp key for that one too. So generally you could avoid it. Oh, actually I should have made that one an F sharp there, but you can write up to an F, but watch the F sharp. It's getting real thin up there anyway. And as usual, saxes can play higher than they can't play lower than this necessarily, but they can play higher by doing stuff with their embouchure or whatever they do. So that covers that. So let me go. I'll just jump over real quick, and I'll show you an example of a chart I did recently that kind of intermixes both the bass area of the Bari Sax and the expressiveness voicing type. Okay, this is a chart on Too Close for Comfort, and this is non-transposed here, so you can get an idea. These would be the actual sounding notes of the Bari Sax. So I've got all the saxes here. I won't show you anything but the saxes, obviously. In the beginning, I've got the Bari Sax functioning as the bass. And as you'll notice, the trombones I don't. So I have the fourth trombone, the bass trombone, within the staff, basically voiced out with the other trombone. So whenever I have the the Bari Sax functioning as kind of the bass guy, I will generally take the fourth trombone, the bass trombone, and voice that within the section. Okay, you can see basically that whole line there. Here I did a real quick voicing within the saxes, but and then alternatively, see how I dropped down and had the bass trombone play those two bass notes. So I don't double them up. I could, I guess. I just got used to not doing that. So I'll use one or the other. And as you can see here, it always depends on what you're doing and what you're writing and what's going on in the other sections. But here I start out with the saxes playing the melody, or the top four saxes, and then I've got the Bari Sax playing with the brass on the bass note. And then right here, since there is like a little soli here and the brass layout, I doubled up the melody with the Bari Sax. So you see how that's blendable? And this would be like kind of like a super sax voicing right here. And then I jump back down and do bass notes again. So pretty much if you go through this whole chart, you'll see that. Bass notes within the section. Bass notes, bass notes. Let's keep going here. Within the section, bass notes. I'm doing hits here with the trombone section. Bass notes, bass notes, bass notes. And I'll show you. Okay, we come to a saxophone soli. Now, here is where I'll move it up, and you can see it's in octaves with the alto sax. So here's the sax soli, and that is like a super sax type of thing. A couple times I jump down to the bass to give like a chord on that beat. But for the most part, this saxophone soli stays within the blendable part of the register. And you can see all the way through. Yeah, pretty much. So that gives you an idea of the Bari Sax. So I hope that helped you get a better handle on how the Bari Sax works if you're not a saxophone player. A lot of arranging just has to do with getting your head around the particular instrument and what it can do when you don't play it. I've heard that a lot of piano players, not a lot, but some piano players have told me that it's difficult for them to get their head around different instrument ranges and that kind of thing because they've always played piano and their range is infinite. Pretty much they got like 5 or 6 octaves going, so it doesn't even matter. So so wrap your head around the Bari Sax with that, and we'll just talk to you soon. I'll do more on this later. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below, and if you'd like to subscribe, do that, and like this video if you did like it. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.